So thank you for joining us for this lunchtime webinar. I'm Elizabeth Rimmer. I'm the Chief Executive at LawCare. We are a charity that support and promote mental health and well-being across the legal profession in the UK. And I'm really pleased to be chairing this lunchtime webinar during Stress Awareness Month, all about stress, but more importantly, how we work together as colleagues across the profession, as conveyancers and estate agents, and our interactions with each other, how we could perhaps be more alive to the impact some of our own behaviors may be having on colleagues. This webinar is brought to you as part of the Be Kind, We Care initiative that was launched by the Conveyancing Foundation, and agents together and LawCare have been part of that in supporting awareness and raising awareness about this campaign throughout the profession. So really pleased to be joined by Lloyd Davies, who I'm sure many of you will know, is the MD of Convey Law, and he's the chairman of the Conveyancing Foundation. I'm really pleased also to have Jason Bull with us today, who is a mentor at Agents Together and the Chief Operating Officer at easyProperty.com. And then also really pleased that we've got Hannah Beko with us, who is a property partner at Gunnar Cook, but she's also a very experienced coach and trainer around the practicalities of managing life in the law. And she's going to be speaking to us a little bit later on about stress and burnout and how we recognize that in ourselves and possibly in others as well. So just to begin with, I want to hand over to Lloyd, who's going to share some of his experiences and insights around what it's been like in the post-pandemic world, in the conveyancing world, and what some of those impacts may have been on us as practitioners, how clients may have been impacting us, and some of the initiatives that are now being embedded to address some of these concerns. So over to you, Lloyd.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and welcome everyone. Yes, so a little bit of a sort of recap on where we are and sort of where we're going, I think. Having spoken to the group previously, just briefly, we all sort of feel that we're in a little bit of a situation at the moment within the conveyancing industry. Obviously, we've had a very, very busy time over the last 2 years, a very difficult time with people working from home, but also the stresses within our environments with the SDLT deadlines. They obviously sort of gave us a sort of false set of waves throughout the course of last year, which were hugely stressful, I think, leading up to September last year. And I don't think actually from our perspective here at Convey Law, they've quite gone away. Certainly the volume of instructions coming through is quite considerable, and managing capacities and the amount of instructions that we're getting in is an important factor. Moving forward, we've seen a dip in instructions in completions at the start of this year, and then again that's gone to a sort of a high last month for completions again. So we seem to be in this sort of continual cycle of ups and downs, peaks and troughs, where we almost get a load of transactions through and then take a breather. And I think we almost need to just try and get out of that and try and get on a little bit more of a level playing field. But I don't think the conveyancing industry is quite out to that yet, but I think we'll get there. I most sincerely hope we do, because I think everyone needs a little bit more of a level playing field going forward. In terms of sort of behaviours within our sector, I think clients' behaviour, I think, last year, actually during the pandemic, was quite good in many respects, because I think they were quite patient and they kind of understood the problems that we had. I think less so this year. Believe it or not, it just seems that they are now just very, very demanding, which is putting a lot of pressure on our teams. I think that again is fueled by the sort of very, very buoyant property market. People are very impatient now because they know that house prices are going up, they may get gazumped, etc. So there's very little tolerance actually in the market, which I think is putting a lot of pressure on all of us in terms of sort of conveyances. We launched obviously the Be Kind, We Care initiative with Elizabeth at LawCare, Agents Together, and also the Mindset Foundation, and we pulled all the resources together so that, everyone had access to, the requirements to help their staff a little bit, during these difficult times. And I do hope that we've certainly raised awareness in terms of mental health and well-being, and perhaps the need to look after our staff better. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Whether or not that now continues is something else. I have a feeling that it will, because I think employers very much do sort of understand that if they don't look after their staff, they will walk. Certainly our relationships with others in the profession has become a lot better, I think, as a result of, the Be Kind, We Care initiative, most notably estate agents, and introducers of business. And I'm sure Jason will pick up on this when he has his talk. But, we have found that they haven't been quite as, aggressive, perhaps at times nasty. And I think, they are far more understanding of what our predicament is, which has been a good thing. And again, of course, it's supply and demand. If they're nasty to us, we don't work for them. So it's it's a quid pro quo there. But I do think that we are raising standards, and I hope everyone can sort of keep going in that respect. It is so important, isn't it, just to be nice and pleasant to each other, because in terms of stress, to just, a nasty comment can ruin someone's day, can't it? Just in terms of sort of how we manage that then from a conveyancing capacity, and how we manage our teams here at Convey Law, and what we've tried to do and bring into place to make sure that people are sort of as well looked after as possible. Most legal practices now, I think, understand that capacity management and workload managing that effectively is absolutely key. Too much work, and I think, the wheels come off. And that's an inevitability, I think. So capacity management, I think, across the legal profession has improved. In terms of infrastructure, we've had an in-house counsellor with us now for the best part of 4 years. And we found that to be quite, I don't quite know how we would manage without him, to tell the truth. He's here every Thursday. He sees sort of, 15 people a week, different people. Everyone goes through different times, and we found that to be, incredibly useful. We're not trained as, mental health. Well, some of us are, but, most people aren't trained in terms of sort of diagnosing individuals or providing the sort of, the counselling that they do need from time to time, because I think a lot of people just go through moments. But those moments are actually sort of repeated when they get under stress. And when things become difficult, and having that in-house resource has been invaluable, I think. Also guidance in terms of, where to go to look for help. We've been sort of sending out information to our staff throughout the course of this month, most notably in terms of stress, but obviously the wellbeing hub we've developed in conjunction with the Be Kind, We Care initiative, which I hope is there to help everyone. I think one of the most important things within our environment that we've learned is that we have to have a very good buddy system, and that helps. I think being able to speak to someone else, if you've got a problem, having that sort of team around you, that little family around you when you've got a problem is absolutely critical. And that brings me on then to sort of hybrid working. And this is something obviously that, most practices now in the, in all professions across the property industry. We've got a lot of people coming back into the office now, but we've still got a lot of people staying at home. And we are completely open as to whether or not people work at home or in the office. If they're training, they need to be with us, because we think that's imperative. But we have found that most people need to have some time with their peers in the office. And for no other reason other than to have a little bit of a chat, have a little bit of a vent, and, just work their way through the difficult situations. And I think, probably in terms of, stress and being at home and becoming myopic around little things is easy, isn't it? Because you think this is your world, this is all it is. Well, you're in the office and someone right next door to you has got the same problem, and they're also slamming the phone down. It is about just actually sort of, a problem shared is a problem halved half the time, isn't it? In terms of stress awareness. And the other thing then, I think, is holidays. Staff don't like, our clients don't like us taking holidays. I spoke to my team today, and I said, what's the sort of lowdown in the industry in terms of what's going on, and are clients any better? And they said, no, they're a lot worse this year. And we closed for an extra day after Easter, and clients, we just had half a dozen clients went absolutely bonkers nuts, couldn't believe that their conveyancer was actually taking time off during, the course of their property transaction. It is a high-powered, it's often a difficult time for people, isn't it? Purchasing, selling a home, it's a big property transaction for them. And so, it is important, though, that I think, that all staff, and we haven't been able to take holidays for so long, have we? And now everything's opening up again. It is important to sort of have that rigidity in terms of holidays. We close over Christmas for 10 days. We've tried to do the same now over Easter, so that everyone had a 5-day break. And actually having those key times throughout the year, I think, is quite important, just to make sure that everyone just takes that time out. And then we are limiting then in terms of, like, you can't email the clients throughout this time. So I hope that those are a few little pointers, and it sort of sets the tone for the rest of the webinar, Elizabeth.
Thanks very much, Lloyd. And I think, listening to you sharing your experiences, I think what we're really seeing now, much perhaps a greater awareness just about how important our people are in our organizations, and recognizing that actually they are the greatest asset. And that particularly in work like conveyancing, managing the expectations of clients and also of other colleagues that you may be working is very challenging. And we're not often generally in the law and in this sector trained really in understanding the position that a client may be in, and for them it's probably the biggest thing going on in their life at that time, whereas you may have 100 other transactions that are going on. And I think sometimes that can help us better understand our own reactions to things if we can understand why other people may be behaving in a certain way. So I'd like to turn over to you now, Jason, and just hear, your take on some of the things that Lloyd's been discussing from the perspective of agents, but also just to remind everybody that which I failed to mention at the beginning, we will have a time for some questions and discussion at the end. And if you do have any comments or queries, please feel free to put those in the chat. And when we get to the end, if you feel comfortable, you can put your camera on and raise a question, or you can put that in the chat. But just over to you now, Jason, to just get your take on some of the issues that Lloyd's been talking about.
Thanks, Elizabeth, and thanks, Lloyd. It's very interesting, actually, from an estate agent's perspective, hearing the viewpoint of a conveyancer or a solicitor's perspective is really valuable, because I think, we both do a very, very similar job. We're dealing with people with high stress, high anxiety, and that extends into our staff as well. They've all had uncertainty. They've got unusual circumstances that we've never experienced before, such as working from home. So there's an awful lot of things going on that I think as employers, we need to recognise. And some of the things that Lloyd was talking about really, really resonated. Things like staff taking time off. So, as an employer, I've got a duty of care to make sure the people that I've got working for me and with me, actually, have you taken some time off? Have you got a weekend booked off? Have you got a long weekend booked off? Even if it's to do nothing but to recharge your batteries. People working from home, it's very, very easy to be in your own very, very small world. And that small world, it's easy to get on a laptop at 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night or 6 o'clock in the morning. One of the things that we've made a pledge to ourselves is that we will not do emails out of hours and text messages, that kind of thing, because what it does, it bleeds into people's time. It bleeds into them potentially being anxious after hours. And it's just, having our minds and eyes open to that type of thing. I think the other thing Lloyd struck up with, which really resonated with me, was observancy. So actually looking around you, the people that you work with, what are the signs that they are currently going through stress? And it will be behaviour, it will be language, it will be tone, it will be a combination of all of those things. So I think potentially as a leader of people, someone that's been in the industry for 35 years, probably found this has been the most challenging because actually there's a set of new problems being thrown our way. And it actually means that you've got to be fairly dexterous in terms of your thought process. I think that's where the charities that have come together have really, really opened up subjects that previously were taboo. You know, things like stress and mental well-being. People wouldn't necessarily openly talk about it. And I think it's those type of things that actually opening the door to it. And Agents Together have been phenomenal for this. State agency has always been quite a kind of macho, ego-driven environment. And I think what we've now done is we've got a metric that enables people to feel comfortable about talking about how they're feeling. Because ultimately, if we're not feeling great, if we've got worries, we've got doubts, we've got concerns, they have to be aired. If they're not aired, they manifest. And that's when you get, some of the terrible problems that you see. Social media can be an absolute viper pit for negative comments. People saying unkind things, a throwaway comment to one person said in anger to someone else is incredibly damaging. So I think it's that type of stuff. So I think, what we've been able to do as an industry, and it was nice to hear Lloyd saying that actually the agents have become perhaps a little bit more tolerant. And that comes down to education. It comes down to education of understanding that actually where does a conveyancer's job begin and end, and where does the estate agent's job begin and end? And through our own business at easyProperty, we have a very, very simple belief. The agent's job is to describe the property, market it, attract the buyer to it, get a sale agreed. And once that has been reached, you're now into the hands of an expert who will guide you through the next part, which is the conveyancer. And if you think about that as fairly simple, I've seen it all too often where estate agents feel the need to interfere with a conveyancer's job. And that to me just adds extra time. It adds extra complaints. It adds extra layers of conflict. And I think, a lot of the things that Lloyd talked about there really do resonate both as a charity, as Agents Together, and actually as someone operating at a high level within an estate agency business. So, it's quite interesting that here we are, allegedly two people that sort of constantly in battle with people, estate agents and conveyancers, yet we share the same problems. And actually by talking to one another, we can solve an awful lot of them.
I think that's just so true. And I think listening to you, the thing that really struck me is a big challenge here is around boundaries. And you're talking about boundaries between the role of a conveyancer and an agent, but also how we manage boundaries now in a hybrid world when you were talking about work bleeding into personal life. And I think, what we're experiencing now in the post-pandemic world is a period of significant change. I mean, we've been through a lot of change over the last 2 years, but we're still in very uncertain times. The way we work has changed significantly. And I think it's important to remember that as humans, I think people are probably just a little bit more depleted than they normally are. And so managing change and new things on top of having lived through a pandemic for 2 years, and we've all had different experiences during this time. Some people have come out of this relatively unscathed. Other people will have experienced illness themselves, bereavements in their family, have found it difficult with working from home. And I think what it's in the positive outcomes of guess of that is that it's exposed that one size does not fit all anymore. We've got a menu of options, but then navigating that as a business owner or as an employer and how you meet the differing needs of your workforce and still keeping people feeling coherent with that sense of belonging, is a real challenge. And just to mention at LawCare, we are, as I mentioned at the beginning, we're a charity that support mental health and wellbeing. And we do run a support service through a helpline, email and web chat for anybody working in the legal sector who's concerned about a personal difficulty or feeling stressed or overwhelmed can contact us for support. And we have lots of resources on our website as well. I want to turn now to Hannah, who's going to give us an insight really into stress and burnout. And you touched on this, Jason, is, how do we recognize the signs in ourselves or in others that they may be experiencing stress and burnout. So Hannah, I'd like to hand over to you now. Thank you.
I was asked to follow on, I suppose, from something I talked about last year. Around a year from now, we talked about stress and burnout on a similar webinar. And I was asked if I could sort of update, where is the legal profession now? Where are we at now with stress and burnout? Where have things changed perhaps over the last couple of years as a result of the pandemic? And Elizabeth has touched on a bit of that already. And not knowing exactly what Elizabeth was going to cover, I wasn't sure whether to include a slide like this one, but LawCare, of course, if you don't know, did a fantastic piece of work last year, a big survey that I'm sure, if you haven't got access to, we can get access for you. It's on their website. But just a couple of bits I wanted to pick up here in terms of where we're at right now. This was released around September 2021. So it is, as far as I'm aware, one of the most up-to-date surveys of the legal profession and where we're at mental health wise. So what the survey found, as you can see here, 69% of legal professionals had experienced mental ill health in the 12 months before completing the survey. 69%. I mean, that is huge. It says here that only 56% of them had talked about it at work. Now, I took this is verbatim from the report. Whereas to my mind, I'm thinking, wow, 56% of them had talked about it at work. When I've been doing this work for sort of 6 or 7 years now with the legal profession, and 6 or 7 years ago, 56% of people were not talking about it at work. I don't think anybody was. So in some respects, we have come a long way, and I think the pandemic has fed into that. We are talking about stress, mental health, well-being, burnout, all of these things far more than we ever were. And I think we do have the pandemic to thank for that. But at the same time, it is a bigger problem than it's ever been. And what I do find is ironic in some ways, and quite a lot of people do say to me, they say, well, there's so much more out there and available for people now in terms of support, because it is more widely spoken about in the legal profession. It's not quite as taboo. There's not as much stigma to putting your hand up and saying, I'm struggling, I need some help. And there is more help out there, yet the problem is still increasing. And so I think, there is an element of, we need more help, we need more support. We still need to be talking about it more, because what is out there isn't actually reducing the numbers. The numbers are still increasing. So we're going to have a little bit of a look at that today. I've popped in here as well that 65% of people surveyed said they were checking their emails outside of work. And I loved Jason's comment. In fact, I wrote it down that he's telling his staff not to be sending emails out of hours. And I think that's really important. I know a lot of people are saying, well, okay, we've got this flexibility now since COVID. And if I want to finish work at 3 and pick the children up and then send emails in the evening, then that's up to me. And it is. Choice is a fantastic thing. And actually having autonomy and choice over our work improves our mental health. So that is a good thing. But I agree with Jason 100% that what we shouldn't be doing is putting our choices onto other people. So just the fact that we might want to be working different hours, I might take a day off in the week and then want to catch up at the weekend, but I don't want my team seeing those emails at the weekend and whether they feel they need to respond or not, I don't want to put that on them. I don't want to have to put that choice on them. So I think it is really important that everybody thinks about their impact on others. So even if you might be choosing to work at different hours, by time delaying that email or whatever you're doing, you're then not impacting other people who might not, they might not be feeling strong enough to make that decision in that moment that, okay, no, I am going to ignore that email until tomorrow morning. They've even seen it and they've got to then make a choice about it. And that does increase stress levels. Point here about burnout, and I'm going to talk about burnout a little bit more in a moment, from the survey again, is that yes, the legal profession are at an extremely high risk of burnout, and that those between 26 and 35 years old were displaying the highest risk scores. And I find that really alarming personally. Again, when I started out this work a few years ago, I expected to be working with people in their mid to late 30s, 40s, etc. People who might be trying to juggle a family and a career, and that sort of thing. I did not expect that I'd be doing the level of work that I am with junior members of our profession. I have paralegals, I have trainee solicitors coming to me for support. It is happening younger and younger now. I know my brother, even in a different industry, who's younger than me, is saying this as well. He is seeing people 2 and 3 years into their careers burning out. So it is something that is happening a lot younger, and something that we definitely need to be more aware of, I think. So you're probably all highly aware of the symptoms of stress, but I think it's good to just mention them here. In terms of yourself, keeping an eye on yourself and if any of these things are popping up, but also, as we've already talked about today, looking out for these in our colleagues, in our friends, but also we've talked about working with agents, we've talked about our clients, being on the lookout for these things with everybody and having that empathy. I do think that our fuse is a bit shorter since the pandemic. I think it's the same with clients and it's the same with agents. And it's very easy for us as the conveyancers, as the solicitors, to get upset if someone has been unreasonable with us, etc. But it is good for us to be able to try and, instead of responding to that, instead of feeling angry or upset or whatever, to actually try and see it from the other perspective, to see the other person's point of view. I quite often might get upset clients, and yes, it can be difficult to deal with, but actually to try and put ourselves in their shoes, that they've been through a difficult 2 years as well. They may have been through ill health, they may be suffering with issues within their family, and so they're not handling things as well as they perhaps might do. So being able to see things from the other perspective does help as well. Even just for us, it stops us getting as angry or as upset as we might do if we're able to see it from other people's perspective. So what sort of things are we looking out for when we're looking out for stress? So sleep issues is the biggest one. It's the biggest one for me. When my stress levels are rising, that's when I start waking up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and running over things and not sleeping very well. So obviously a sleep issue is a good indicator of stress, if you like. And then almost it's a vicious circle, isn't it? Because then if you're not having enough sleep, then you're not able to cope with things as well, and your stress levels rise again. Lack of patience. So that, I think, is what we're really seeing a big problem with, as we've talked about quite a lot today already. People are, we're a bit like elastic bands. We've all been stretched. This was a stressful profession in the first place, and we've taken the last 2 years and we've stretched people even further. And, there's only so much sort of stress, etc., and pressure that people can put up with before they do snap. And I think this has resulted in people having a lot less patience than they might have had. So that's something obviously to be aware of with ourselves, but also if people are not reacting to us in a way that we would like them to, if they're not being as polite with us as we would like, then it might be an indication that they've got something obviously going on with themselves. Another symptom of stress is memory issues. If you're struggling to remember things as much, if you're struggling to concentrate and focus as much as you did, then that might be a sign of stress levels increasing. Procrastination is a great one, I think, here. Not actually spending more time thinking about what we need to do than actually doing it. And this is a big problem I'm seeing with a lot of people, and why almost workloads are increasing as well. So when Lloyd was talking earlier about support for teams in terms of, capacity and workload management, my suggestion, if you do look after people within your organisation, is also to have a look at some of the mindsets and the thought processes that might be going on, because a lot of the legal professionals I work with, stress is then causing them to procrastinate. So rather than actually just get on with their day's work and therefore get through their work and get finished, there's a lot of this worrying, procrastinating, not making decisions. So they're not actually getting through their work as quickly as they might be able to, which then results in the longer working hours. So it is something to have a look at with your teams potentially. And almost one of my, if you can have a favourite symptom of stress, this is almost one of my favourite symptoms of stress, is looking out for silly things that might be happening that might be out of character and not normal for you. So for me, in my example a few years ago, it was reversing into stationary objects. I would reverse my car 3 times in 1 year into stationary objects, which made me realise that I was doing everything too fast and not paying enough attention to what I needed to do. So if you look out, again, in yourself and others for things that might be out of character, then that can be a sign that someone's stress levels are rising. Looking at burnout as well, some things to look out for is if there is this feeling of being more cynical and demotivated at work. So if you notice in yourself that you just can't find the motivation to get into work and you're feeling very cynical about it all, and does it even matter, and do I even want to be in this career anymore, etc. Very understandable, and we know that we're seeing a lot of people exit the conveyancing world and the legal world generally at the moment. It could well be as a result of burnout. And I do always encourage people when they come to me and say, I'm thinking about leaving, is okay, let's have a look at that, because it might be that it is stress or burnout that's causing you to make that decision. Whereas if you actually tackle that, then maybe that's not the right decision for you. You want to make a decision from a place of power and of strength, if you like, rather than from a place of stress and burnout. Another symptom is feeling that you're just not performing as well as you could, that you're letting people down, whether it's at work, whether it's at home, perhaps it's both, and generally feeling exhausted. I mean, these are the sorts of symptoms of burnout, which is on the rise, as we saw from the survey from LawCare. And one other thing I wanted to point out about burnout for particularly people with staff that they manage is that burnout happens after the event very often. So we might think, we've come through the pandemic, we've come through the stamp duty deadlines. We're into an easier ride now, if you like. The worst is behind us. That's when we'll really start to see more burnout, in my opinion. It often happens afterwards. I see people who'll go for promotions, and after they've got their promotion, in the months after that, they're burnt out because they used everything they could to get their promotion, and then they're burning out. I was talking to a lawyer a few months ago who handed his notice in last year. 3 days after he handed his notice in, he had effectively a breakdown. So it's after the event that these things happen. So do look out for your teams. I know we think we might be through the worst of it and we might be getting back to normal or whatever that's going to be, but this is when we are going to see higher instances of burnout, I think, in my opinion. It's just like when I'm sure I'm not the only one that this happens to, when you're working up to a holiday and then the minute you go on holiday, you get ill because your body suddenly sort of relaxes. You've been using that adrenaline to keep you going, to get all the work done so you can get on holiday. And then the minute you're on holiday, the adrenaline comes down, the body relaxes, and you get those illnesses. And I personally think burnout is a bit like that. We can keep going to a certain point and then it might catch us after that. So what should you be looking out for with other people? Maybe it's other people in your team, maybe it even is clients and people that you're working with. So look for things like detachment. They start to detach themselves from work and from other people. Maybe they were very sociable people before. Maybe whatever was going on, Zoom or in person, they were always there. Maybe they were always volunteering for things and suddenly they're not doing. Look for that sort of detachment. Any behavioural changes. So it might be that you see that they're, eating more junk food or drinking more than they would at a social event, something like that. Look out for those sorts of things. Attitude and personality differences. So things like maybe they were the most easygoing person before and now they are losing their temper more quickly. They have less patience. Maybe they've become quieter. Maybe they used to be very chatty and they're starting to be quieter. All of those sorts of differences can lead to there being something that they might need some support with. Performance dropping obviously is another one. So those are the things that I wanted to suggest to you that you stay on the lookout for. As I say, there's a lot of positives in terms of the discussions and the support that is out there for people in terms of mental health and burnout and stress. But I think we are still almost at the tip of the iceberg. I think we are going to see a lot more issues, and the more we're alive to that for ourselves and for other people, the better it will be, I hope. And another initiative that Nicola kindly said I could mention is Wellbeing Week in Law, which is happening next week. It's something that started in the States, but I thought it was such a good idea. So I've got some sessions that we've put together for next week. Any funds raised are going to LawCare because I'd always love to support them. So there'll be some more details sent out to you after the session today about what's going on next week. But very happy to take any questions or to connect with anybody on LinkedIn to talk about it any further. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Hannah, for taking us through some of those very common signs. That, listening to them, I think we often see those signs in other people. The challenge then is how we approach that and do something. And I just wondered if this is resonating for people participating in the webinar, if you had any thoughts on if you were concerned about a colleague who might be exhibiting some of those signs, was what steps, how you might raise that with them or have a conversation with them about it.
My thought on that is it's best to normalise it. And I think it's a point that's been made already, that a problem shared is a problem halved. And also feeling as though you're not alone and that other people feel like that. I mean, that is one of the biggest changes I have seen in the legal profession over the years, is that instead of us all suffering alone and thinking it's just me, I'm a failure because I can't cope with the stress and that sort of thing, even there being conversations where people realise it's happening to lots of people makes it okay. And even if it doesn't fix it for you, it at least stops you having those extra feelings of I failed and I'm not good enough. It's okay, I've got this stress to deal with now, let's deal with it, let's find a way, let's deal with it without all the extra burdens on top. So I think if there is somebody you're worried about, starting the conversation, I mean, obviously it depends on their personality, but starting the conversation from a position of, I've struggled with this, or I've struggled with sleeping, or I've noticed that, I just can't concentrate as much as I did before. It can make them feel more that they can open up to you. So I think that's probably the easiest place to start, is talking about how you might be struggling with something, that opens the door for them to say it. Obviously, if you know them well, I would come out as openly as possible and say, I'm worried about you. I'm worried about, you seem to be quieter than you were. You seem to be, maybe you're snapping at people and that's not normally your personality. If you know them well enough, I would be open about it.
I think that's really important because, when we think about the workplace, people who are in work, be it online or in the real world, we spend a significant, more than half our time is spent with colleagues. We spend more time with our colleagues at work than we probably do with our friends and our family. And it's often those people who might see things and have that opportunity to step in and could make a difference. I mean, Jason, from your perspective as an employer, I mean, and Hannah picked up on our burnout stat. So in LawCare's Life of the Law survey, we used a recognized scale for measuring burnout and found, as Hannah's already pointed out, higher risk of burnout in that age group, 26 to 35. We actually found, though, that across the board, the cutoff point for high risk of burnout was about 36 or 37 on this scale, that our sample scored collectively almost 42. So the people responding to our survey were already at significant risk of burnout. And I think there's an important conversation to be had there in workplaces about what responsibilities employers have to be thinking about some of those triggers for burnout in the workplace and how they manage those. And I just wondered if you had any input or perspectives on that, about things you might be doing or approaches that you've taken in your workplace.
Yeah, there's nothing majorly significant there, but what we do use is we use personality profiles for when we recruit people. So what we've got is a very, very good understanding of what that base personality is. And as you quite rightly said, Hannah, when you see unusual behaviour, actually that is your warning sign. Actually, the person that by nature is a certain type of trait or character is now behaving very, very differently. That's not natural. Something's causing that, whether it's something internal or something external going on outside of work. So I think it's the whole thing that Lloyd mentioned at the very outset about retention of staff. This, to me, is one of the key things that actually impacts organisations and how you retain your staff. It's not necessarily about how much money you pay them, how frequently you promote them. It's about, do you understand them? Do you appreciate them? And it sounds a strange word to use, but do you care? Mm. I've come previously from a very, very big corporate background, and I would say it was probably the most uncaring organisation I've ever experienced. And what that does as a senior leader, actually that bleeds into you and you start become uncaring yourself about the people that you work with. And I think companies of all shapes and sizes have got this type of responsibility to actually care about their individuals. And that for me is probably one of the biggest things that Agents Together has done in the estate agency industry. It's opened up that does matter. how people feel and do you show them that you care really, really does count. And some of the tips and hints that are recommended, things like, reading material, webinars, blogs, all of that kind of stuff goes to help us actually get in a better mental state. Lots of people will go for a run or they'll go to the gym, but actually the thing that fuels all of that and powers it is our mind. And actually it's our mind that needs to be really well cared for. And I think, every one of us at some point in our life, whether it's diagnosed or undiagnosed, will suffer some kind of mental stress, and our well-being mentally will suffer. And I think it's just, as leaders of business, as employers, I think we've all got a responsibility to see that now as it's part and parcel of my responsibility. It's not just about metrics and KPI. I've got a responsibility to make sure the people that I work with are as well as they possibly can be, and I'm not adding to whatever stress that they're feeling. And I think that's a massive, massive mindset change from employers. And I would say it's probably been pandemic, and Hannah said, we've got the pandemic to thank for that. And I think this, for me, hopefully, is something that will see a massive sea change in certain industries, that, mental care and well-being becomes a hot topic.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, that I think that if we want to call it the sort of pandemic dividend, if there is one, I think in terms of our working lives, it has really pushed much higher up the agenda. That, all the things you were talking about is that as human beings, we are group animals, so to speak. We like to operate with other people. We like to feel that we belong. And I think that what people want from the workplace is that sense of, I'm in a place where I belong. People value me. They respect me. I can be myself. This is a positive culture. And I think that then helps people feel much more enabled to put their hand up if they are worried about something or they're struggling, because they think, I trust the people that I work with and I know that they're going to help me. And while you were speaking, it just made me realize I saw something, it's quite corny, but I really liked it, that I think I saw on LinkedIn yesterday, which was, be the reason someone believes in good people. And I thought, that's sort of what we want in our workplaces. And, when you touched on, across all sectors, there are significant recruitment problems now, brought on by the pandemic, Brexit. I think potentially really it's that people have done a lot of reflecting on what they want out of life and work. And some people have come back out of the pandemic and thought, I ain't working the way I used to. I'm gonna jack it all in, and I've always wanted to, run a fish and chip shop down on a beach in Devon, and that's what I'm gonna do, kind of thing, if they're in the luxurious position of sort of being able to manage that. But I think that we as employers now in workplaces, we're gonna have to work harder to make sure we're meeting some of those wider needs of people and actually creating environments where people want to work, and that just throwing money at people isn't going to be enough. Hannah, I don't know if you have anything you'd want to chip in on that.
I would actually, because I agreed with everything Jason said about, we should look after our people because it's the right thing to do. But you know what? I'd even appeal to the business side of people. Not only is it the right thing to do, but your people will perform so much better if they are happy and their stress levels are under control, or when they feel that they need a bit of support, they go and get it. Because just as Jason said, mental health and stress is something, particularly in this profession, it's not a 1 in 4, it's a 1 in 1. At some point in our careers, it's always going to hit us. And actually, rather than seeing it as a negative almost, it's like, actually, but if we accept it's going to affect everybody, then let's just get the strategies in place and the tools in place. And whenever we need them, we know where they are and we'll go and get them. But when you've got that support for your people, they will perform better. They will be better with client service. All the statistics shows it. So you'll have happier clients. You'll be making more money. You'll have less sick days, less turnover. In every single business metric, is it a good thing to have happy workforce? Absolutely. So I suppose that's what I'd add, Elizabeth, from the business side.
And I think, Hannah, what you've said makes me, realize that, of course, ultimately happy conveyancers, happy estate agents, have happier clients, because we're better able to meet those expectations of clients, because we've got more in the tank when, you know, it's been a long day and you've had 25 phone calls from people chasing whatever needs to be chased, that you're just better able to respond to that. And, you know, and I think it gets to the efficient and effective delivery of the services that our clients expect from us, and a more competent service as well. If people are stressed and overwhelmed or burnt out, they're going to be less able to make good decisions, ethical decisions, and be efficient in the work that they do. And ultimately that has a knock-on for clients. I don't know if anybody has got any questions for our panel that they'd like to pop in the chat box or raise their hand on Zoom. We'll put their cameras on. We're very very keen to have any questions that you might have. I'm not sure if I can see any just now. I'll just go into full screen. Well, I think if we don't have any more questions, then there are plenty of resources to support you both from an individual perspective and how you might manage your own stress or burnout or mitigate the risk of that, and with colleagues, but also from an employer and business perspective, how is people that have a management responsibility or run an organization, there are lots of resources out there to help you around creating healthier workplace environments. And as Nicholas just popped up in the chat box there, all of those resources will be shared afterwards. They're also on all of our websites. And I think the big message is that there's plenty of help and resources out there. And that the most important thing is, as Hannah nicely put it, that, you know, we just need to be much more open and talking about these issues within our organizations. And then when we need that help, we know where to go and get it. And it's not seen as something that we need to hide away from. It's just one of those things, because it's something that we're all going to experience during our lives, both professionally and personally. So I'd like to thank you all for joining us. And there's the Be Kind, We Care Hub. And I'd also really like to thank Hannah and Jason and Lloyd for coming along and sharing their insights and knowledge with all of us, which I'm sure you've all found useful and will give you food for thought when you get back to your real desks or virtual desks about the sort of steps you might be able to take in your own organizations to improve culture and create healthier workplaces, because ultimately we don't want people to be stressed or burnt out. And actually there's so much we can do to prevent that. And that's really where we all want to be. So we want to stop these things from happening in the first place. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Thank you.